Open Blender and make a new 2D animation file either from the opening dialog or from File, New, 2D Animation. We should have our Draw tool selected. We should be in Draw mode. Our Draw tool should be set to Pencil. And we're going to come up here to our tool settings and set the strength to 1 and turn off the strength pressure sensitivity toggle. Time to show off some of our drawing skills. Out here, yeah. In a grease pencil object, every line you draw is assigned a material. If we come over here to the Properties tabs and find the one that looks like a beach ball, we can look at the properties of our material. Our lines have been assigned a default material named Solid Stroke. We can change the color of our stroke by clicking the base color swatch beneath the stroke properties. I'm going to add a fill to our material and turn off the stroke altogether. Finally, let's go ahead and change our fill color. Since we're done drawing for now, let's switch from draw mode into object mode using the mode menu in the upper left-hand corner. Notice that when I switch into object mode, our toolbar changes, our menus change, and our top toolbar info changes as well. Our draw tool has also gone away, and instead we have this select box as our active tool. In Blender, modes determine what tools and menus are available to us and what operations we can perform. If you're in a hurry to switch modes, you can use Blender's cool Control-Tab shortcut to call up a pie menu of your different available modes. Blender's pie menus are gestural, meaning you don't have to wait around for them to show up before they can take effect. Anyway, let's get back to object mode. Before we start animating, let's go to the Overlays menu in the upper right-hand corner of our viewport and turn on the 3D cursor. While we're here, let's double-check that Origins is selected as well. Next, go to the Outliner, which lists all of the objects in our scene. Make sure that the grease pencil object, named Stroke, is selected. A selected object will have an orange outline in the viewport. The orange dot on our screen is our grease pencil object's origin. The origin is used to calculate an object's position, rotation, and scale. The red and white hoop around our dot is the 3D cursor. We can use the cursor tool from our toolbar to click and drag the 3D cursor somewhere closer to the center of our object. And then, by hitting Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor, we can change the location of our origin. Since we're done using the 3D cursor, switch back to the Box Select tool and turn off the 3D cursor in the Overlays until we need it again. And before we start animating, let's go ahead and zoom our view out until we can see the full extent of our camera frame. First, double check that we are in fact looking through the camera. The white text below the mode menu should read camera perspective. If it doesn't, you can hit the camera toggle until it does. To zoom the camera in and out, middle mouse wheel scroll, or go to the magnifying glass on the right side of the menu and click and drag up and down. To start animating, select our object and switch our dope sheet view from grease pencil to dope sheet. We're going to animate our object by setting keyframes on the timeline and letting Blender calculate all of the frames in between, a process known as tweening. A keyframe is a point in time, or a frame, where the animator has set a specific value on one or more of an object's defined properties. To get an example of this, let's go over to the Object Properties tab, the small orange square. Our grease pencil object, named Stroke, has the following properties defined: location, X, Y, and Z, rotation, X, Y, and Z, and scale, X, Y, and Z. Each one of those properties contains a numerical value. Let's set our first keyframe on the X location property by clicking on the small white dot to the right and noticing that it becomes a diamond, the channel changes color, and a keyframe is inserted on the dope sheet for that property. Before we set our second key, let's go ahead and shorten our play range so it's easier to navigate the timeline. We can center and scale our timeline view by using a combination of shortcuts such as middle mouse wheel, scroll, middle mouse wheel, click and drag, and by dragging the range slider bar endpoints and start points. Let's scrub out to frame 40, enter a new value up here in our X location. We can either enter a number directly into the channel box, or click and drag in the channel to interactively set our location. Once I'm happy with my location, I'll set a key by clicking on the blank diamond on the right side of our channel. If you noticed, our dope sheet is looking pretty blank. It's because I forgot to reselect my grease pencil object. Once I select it, we're back in business, and we can see the key has been set on frame 40. I can scrub the timeline manually, or I can hit spacebar to play. If I want to change the position of one of my keyframes, I scrub the time slider back, and this time I'll just go here and move it off stage. When I double click the keyframe icon, our channel now reads with that off yellow color. That indicates that we have a keyframe set for the object's current position. Now, let's zoom out and add some scale animation to our object. We could use the same technique we used to set our location keys by coming over to the object properties and changing the values here and then setting our keys. But let's try a different way of setting keyframes. I'll hit S for scale and then left mouse click and drag. Notice in our dope sheet that we do not have any scale keys yet. And if we look over here in the object properties, we can see that as well. So in order to set a keyframe, we'll use the keyboard shortcut I for insert keyframe and then choose scale from the drop-down menu. Now we have scale keys on frame 1. To finish our scale animation, I'll go to frame 40, hit S again, and left mouse click and drag to change our scale, and hit I to insert our scale key. Great. So now our object is changing location and scale. Now let's set some rotation animation along our object's y-axis. If I go to my Overlays menu and turn on our axes, and then middle mouse click and drag to rotate, you can see our plane is aligned along the x-axis, left to right, the z-axis, up and down, and the y-axis actually runs through our object. To go back to my camera view, I'll click on the camera button. Since I only want to rotate on the y-axis, I'll go to the object properties and set a key for our first frame, scrub out to our last frame, and this time I'll enter a value of 360 and set a key, and I'll clean up by going back to frame 1 and entering a value of 0 and double-clicking on the diamond to reset the keyframe. Nice. We now have animation keyframes established on all 3 of our main transform properties: location, rotation, and scale. If we want to change when something happens or the speed at which something happens, we do that by moving our keys around on the timeline. We can either move the keys of individual properties, or we can grab one of the master controls for the keys on that frame and move them all at once. We duplicate keys in the timeline by selecting them and hitting Shift-D and moving our mouse. When we see an orange bar between keys, this is indicating that we have what are known as hold keys set. That is, there's no change from one key to the next. So when I scrub my timeline, there's no change. When there's not an orange bar, there is change. So we've done two things here. We've told the animation to begin 15 frames later, and we've also shortened the amount of time it takes for our position, rotation, and scale animations to take place. Let's take a look. I'm telling y'all, learning when and how to set hold keys is going to really improve the quality of your animation. If I want to shift my whole animation around the screen, I can do so by using the delta transform properties. Underneath our location, rotation, and scale, delta transform has location, rotation, and scale as well, but this affects the entire animation. So if I adjust our X position, the entire animation has shifted over to the left. Alright, I want to edit my animation a little bit more by changing the end position of my square. I want it to finish its movement closer to the center of our camera frame. This means I'll be changing the location properties of our keyframe on frame 40. Now, one issue I'm going to be running into right away is that I only have keys set on the X location, and I'm going to be changing the X and Z location. So to prepare for this, I'm going to go back to frame 1 and set keys on my Y and Z locations, and same for frame 15. And those should still be hold keys, as we can see by the orange bars. Now on frame 40, I can go ahead and select the Move tool from my toolbar, change the position of my object, and set my keys. Notice that the Y location is still a hold because we haven't changed our object's proximity to the camera. Let's see what our edited animation looks like. Next, I'm going to duplicate my entire grease pencil object. With the object selected, I hit Shift-D. Once I do that, if you look over on the outliner, you see I have two stroke objects now. And my cursor is changed to a white compass arrow. If I just move my mouse, my new object moves with it. When I click, it sets the position of my object. Now, if I scrub the timeline, my object jumps right back to where it was. And so we can't even tell that we have two objects in the scene. But we know we do because in the outliner there are two objects. So let's see what we can do here. Well, to avoid confusion, I'm going to turn off the visibility of my first original object. And now I know I've just got this one, the new one, selected. Then what I'm going to do is zoom out, and I'm going to move this new object up here, and I'm going to set a new key. Okay, this looks great, but you'll see we need to reestablish our hold keys. Before we do that, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. Our X location has been separated from our Y and Z locations, which makes it harder for us to duplicate and select. So let's move it down using a shortcut. With this channel selected, I can hit Page Down and change its position in the dope sheet. Now, I can grab these three, hit Shift D, and pull them over to reestablish our hold. So now our new object holds and then rotates down into the center. I'll turn my original object back on and we now have two. So it's important to understand these are two completely separate objects. So I can edit these accordingly. So if I wanted this to rotate in the opposite direction, I could go down to frame 40 and change my rotation key to -360. Alright, I'm going to speed the camera up and go ahead and make 2 more copies, so we'll have all 4 of these coming together in the center. Alright, well that's looking pretty cool. If I want to get a better sense of how this will look to the audience, I can go and select my camera object in the outliner, go to the Camera Object Data Properties tab, and go to Viewport Display, and increase the value of my Passepartout up to 1. And we can get a better sense of how this is playing. Alright, we'll leave it there and let you get into some trouble on your own.